Welcome to Truck and Talk, the podcast where we roll up our sleeves and get into the real conversations that matter to drivers. Today, we're welcoming back someone our listeners know well, Robert Pierson, the Vice President of Driver Recruiting at MVT Family Transportation. Last time, Robert gave us an inside look at what it takes to join the MVT family. This time, we're digging into new territory, how MVT is addressing subjects like driver shortage and the advantages of dedicated accounts. Most importantly, we'll hear Robert's perspective on why our drivers aren't just numbers, they're the heartbeat of our success. So, Robert, welcome back.
Good to be back. Excited to be with you again.
And we're excited to have you here.
Great.
So before we dive into today's main conversation, we want to take a quick detour into our segment that we call Fuel for Thought. So this is where we zoom out for a moment and we talk about something happening in the trucking world right now. So something that matters to drivers, the industry, and the work that we do every day here at MVT.
Let's do it.
All right. So first, the FMCSA is rolling out significant updates to the SMS in 2025, aiming to simplify violation severity scales, clarify scoring, and create fairer safety comparisons among carriers. So, Robert, as someone who guides drivers through our system, how might these upcoming changes affect how we evaluate and recruit talent, especially those looking for long-term stable careers?
Yeah, it won't impact necessarily the top 10% of the industry. That bottom 10%, right now it feels like they're constantly under threat. We've gone through a lot of changes over the years between the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, a lot of the insurance increasing in our industry. This is a continuation of that. The bottom 10% is slowly being purged out of the industry. So for the driver that's on time consistently, doesn't have tickets, doesn't have accidents, their world will not change dramatically that much. For the driver that maybe has some inconsistencies in their driving career, doesn't take care of the definition of what it means to be a professional truck driver, this is yet another step down that process of purging them out of the industry. Not everybody should be a driver. We talk a little bit about there being a driver shortage in this industry. I don't know that I necessarily have believed that for the 20 years I've been in this industry. I do think there's seasonal shortages, but we've been in a freight recession coming up on about 3 years. If there's a shortage, you wouldn't be in a freight recession for 3 years. And so one of the things that I see is as that bottom 10% continues to get purged, it's going to be incumbent on the carriers, though, to be very selective in their hiring practices, not just for themselves as far as what their operational needs are, but quite frankly for their safety record and how they're viewed versus their peers.
Okay. So AI is revolutionizing recruiting, helping match drivers to roles faster, reduce turnover, and streamline hiring with tools that analyze driver applications. So how are you leveraging AI in MVT's recruiting process to connect with the right candidates while keeping that personal touch?
We use it on a limited basis. I don't find that it's still a proven product as of yet. In particular, when it comes to major life decisions, I have some trust issues with it. I do think there's some advantages down the road. I get about 40 to 50 salespeople a week trying to pitch me the newest AI platform, so it's a common call that I get. And all of a sudden, everybody's an expert on NVIDIA stock that didn't know about it 6 months ago. I think the big thing right now is it does have applications such as after-hours coverage, giving drivers the chance to do a short-form application with their voice more so than online. With that said, part of our challenge as an industry is relationship-based, and I have not seen where AI successfully is going to build a relationship. A lot of AI platforms are promising lower turnover, but they have no metrics to back it up yet whatsoever. So I think it's coming. I think it's coming quicker than we may realize. That, with technology, it tends to speed up as time goes on. But there's some limited applications for it right now. The value of an actual recruiter is build a relationship, find out what the driver's needs, their wants are, who else is the decision maker in the process. That is something that I've not seen duplicated, and really your top 10% of driver recruiters have mastered that. So we'll see how this plays out, but I can tell you the salespeople are very excited about selling it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for setting the your insight setting the tone here for our conversation. So appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into our main discussion now. So since the last time you were here, what has changed in your world of recruiting?
Yeah, the exciting part for us is our dedicated business continues to expand. It gets drivers great home time, and as we talked about the relationships in the last segment, it allows the driver to have a relationship at the terminal level, at the customer level. We're excited about it. The turnover is substantially lower with that type of business. And we've built really good rapport with the customer that in other scenarios we might not be able to just because of how closely we have to work together. So we're excited about that. We're recently starting a dedicated account out of Rincon, Georgia, which should be really exciting and a new market for us that we've not been in before. So that's got my recruiters pretty excited. Beyond that, we've hired some really good drivers that have had some great insights. So we have a lot of projects that are really driver focused, that the drivers are the ones that came up with it. So we're excited to see the results of that over the next 3 months as well.
Of course, we invite people to listen to the back catalog and hear your initial interview with us here on the podcast. But for those who don't know about dedicated accounts, can you explain a little bit about what it means and how it benefits drivers day to day?
Yeah. So in our world, I'll give you an example. We have an opportunity out of Columbus, Ohio, where we have approximately 45, 50 drivers up there. Some drivers have specialized jobs that they service that one customer, and they will do store deliveries as an example. So it's a very Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. start time, get home about 3 p.m. And a lot of drivers have wanted that. They like the profession of the job, but one of the things that's a challenge for a lot of drivers is the schedule of it. Some people realistically can't be a driver because they can't go run teams 4 weeks at a time. So that's an exciting thing for people like that. And then we have a more specialized part of the business that ends up running primarily at night, weekends, filling last-minute orders for the customer. It's exciting because there's some camaraderie amongst the group. It creates a set schedule, and the relationship that at the terminal level, the office personnel, the terminal manager has with the drivers, they physically get to see each other every single day, which in our industry, you and I may take that for granted. We'll see our coworkers continuously. A driver doesn't always have that intimate relationship with somebody in the office, and so it's been exciting for us.
Yeah, people need to have interaction, right?
They do. It's the challenge of a fleet manager. That fleet manager may have 40 to 50 drivers on their board that they're working with right now, and that fleet manager has the challenge of, hey, I want to know more than just you going from point A to point B. What are your interests? What are your likes? What are your career goals? And so that kind of gets sped up in the dedicated world a lot.
So I know you've talked a little bit about how drivers have consistency when they do a dedicated account, but can you talk about a driver whose career maybe really took off after moving to a dedicated account?
Yeah. We've had several within our wings, and then over the course of my career, I've worked with about 400 different dedicated accounts that we've been on. One of the stories I always remember most is we had a gentleman that we hired that a year earlier had been homeless, literally in a really bad situation. And the fact is this person had worked with an OTR company, eventually came to us, and needed to have that set schedule. Much different, though. Their career path could have went in two very different trajectories. At this point now, he's talking about a family, buying a house, has a 5-year plan. That's kind of really exciting to us in recruiting because our job's not necessarily to fill trucks. Our job really is to create long-term success and growth within the fleet. So those types of stories are very commonplace.
Yeah, that's really exciting to hear that.
Yeah, it's exciting and rewarding for us.
Right. So driver shortages, you mentioned them earlier, but they're affecting the whole industry. So what specific steps is MVT taking to stay ahead of that challenge?
I would say that it's creating a clear-cut value proposition for the driver. In a lot of ways, most carriers play in the same sandbox. We're all competing for the same freight, the same customers. So there's limitations where you'd like to make your next wave of drivers the next millionaires. That may not be possible in the current freight environment. And so one of the things that we look is we need to have a clearly defined goal of, hey, we need to state our value proposition to a driver. If we can't do that, it's going to be hard to recruit, and you're definitely not going to retain. The other part of that equation is understanding our own business model and who our driver needs to be that's going to have success here. Not everybody's going to come to MVT and like it, but a lot will. And it's clear that we're honest in that discussion with the driver, kind of talking about what AI can't duplicate. It's having that conversation with the driver of what are your career goals? What do you want to do long term? And being honest, do we have that or do we not have that?
So how do you balance hiring experienced drivers with bringing in new talent who may need more training?
Yeah. So in particular out of El Paso, but we have some opportunities for inexperienced drivers out of DFW, Nashville, and Laredo, Texas. We have some good partnerships. One of the schools we work with here in El Paso is Western Tech. Really good detailed training for a prospective driver. We work with them in that partnership. When they come to us, they're going to get a mentor that's going to work with them for the next 60,000 miles. One of our mentors is not somebody that simply has a CDL. They have a safe driving history. They have a track record. Our trainers are absolutely at the pinnacle of our fleet. So that person's being put in hands that are knowledgeable on the job and really, more importantly, good at teaching the job, which is a different skill set.
So recruiting can sometimes feel impersonal or transactional in this industry. It sounds like you try to do as much as you can to make sure that people feel like they're being heard and listened to. But how do you ensure that drivers experience real connection and care from day one?
One of the ways I would point to it is accountability, and there's ownership of it. One of the reasons that our fleet managers want to physically meet the drivers after orientation, which is not necessarily an industry standard, is there's a level of accountability when you have to physically shake someone's hand and look them in the eye. That seems small, and post-COVID, when we got into the Teams environment, that somewhat got lost. Our industry and other industries are struggling with it as they came out of that stretch. That interaction, that one-on-one, we have a bond, I now owe you something, has a lot of meaning to both the driver, the fleet manager, the recruiter, et cetera. So we try to focus, how do we create that accountability? And I'll give you an example. One of the partners we have is Hello Retention. So let's say as a driver that you have an issue, Hello Retention talks with you on a weekly basis, and you go, you know what, I have a truck issue. The truck issue's not been fixed. I'm really concerned about it. It's one thing to get a chance to complain about an issue. It's a different thing to have someone with accountability. It creates a resolution ticket. That resolution ticket is seen by about 8 different people, and someone has ownership. The problem will get solved within 24 hours. That seems like a little deal, but that accountability, that ownership of the problem makes a difference. And most drivers that quit, you will find it's not one thing that normally made them quit. It was normally a series of things. Now, at the end was the straw that broke the camel's back. You can avoid that long pathway of problems along the way if you have accountability and knock out the first problem in one shot.
Oh, we've talked about it on this podcast before about people just want to be heard sometimes. They don't know that they're being heard. So that's important.
Yeah, if you think of any like Angie's List or any website that you would complain, a lot of times the person complaining about the cheeseburger at McDonald's, they're not expecting the cheeseburger to change. McDonald's is pretty much going to make the same food. They want to be heard. They just want to get their frustration out. And sometimes it's positive too. It can be negative, but a lot of times it can also be positive. If someone has that outlet, it makes a big difference, especially in a profession where the driver may often feel isolated or like they're not being heard. They technically may be talking to the person they report to 1,500 miles away. Them having that voice becomes very important.
So when you think about the best drivers that you've met, what personal qualities stand out, and how do you look for those when you're recruiting new drivers?
It's a driver that has a career path. We are in an industry that is very day-to-day, week-to-week. I describe it like an NFL football season where, this week you might be a stud and the next week you're a loser because something went wrong. It feels that way sometimes, and you get in a very week-to-week mindset. And the problem is you're never really satisfied in that environment, feeling like you're missing something. The challenge for most drivers is having a 5 to 10 year window of what do I want to do 5-10 years from now, and we want to have that discussion with a driver. And this is the nice thing that MVT has, is actual career paths. The hard part for a lot of trucking companies is the job you do today is going to be the job you do 10 years from now, because that is the only job they have, which for a lot of drivers is not very rewarding. We have drivers that may decide, I want to become an owner-operator. I want to become a mentor for that next wave of students coming through. It may be somebody who goes, I'd like to work in the office. I want to get involved with operations. I want to take a different role within the team. It may be, I'd like to get into safety. You know what? I'm a safe driver. I'd like to get in that facet. Due to our size and our continuing expansion, a lot of those career opportunities exist. The key for us is having that discussion of what career path, where do you see yourself 5 years, 10 years from now? For a lot of drivers, both female and male, their spouse plays an intimate role in that conversation. They may have views of, hey, we're going to have kids down the future. Let's talk about what we're doing 10 years from now. So that's one of the things that we try to separate ourselves is let's not go from that week-to-week discussion. Let's talk about what the future holds.
Okay, and speaking of the future, we were talking about AI earlier. So there's always a worry that AI is going to replace the human touch. So do you see it as a help or a threat to building those driver relationships?
I see it as a tool that can help in certain scenarios. I don't think there's a reason necessarily to fear it completely. I do think the kinks need to get worked out of it, but I think there's scenarios where it can help. That's where a lot of companies, as AI comes in, and it is coming, has to be somewhat calculated in where they use it and how they use it. The key is once that driver feels like they're not being heard, and my fear, I look at it, how would I want to be in a truck? You know, if you are having a bad time, do you want to hear press 1, now press 5? At a certain point, you feel like you're just part of the cog, you're part of the machine. That's what has to be avoided in the process.
So when you're talking to a potential driver, what is the number one thing that you want them to feel about MVT?
That we are not looking for them to pull a load tomorrow. We're thinking about the load that's going to be pulled 10 years from now.
Wow, can you explain a little bit more about that?
It's that long-term trajectory. It is recruiters. A lot of stereotypes of recruiters is they're trying to get another notch on the bedpost, or they're trying to get another hire. It's not like that. Ultimately, our long-term goal is how we build the fleet, what the fleet looks like 12 months, 24 months from now. So if I have a good orientation next week, will I get a data boy and a pat on the back? Probably. But if all those drivers are gone 4 weeks later, that pat on the back's going away. That's being taken back.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what is a lesson that you've learned from drivers that maybe has changed the way that you approach recruiting?
Empathy is probably the greatest trait you can have for success. We can get somewhat, like I said, very short-sighted, and having empathy for others, wanting the best for others, generally pays off in the dividends. It's kind of that karma. So if I do right by a driver in the hiring process, I am generally going to be rewarded for it. It may not be a financial reward necessarily, but if we do our jobs well and execute, the exciting part for us, next week we have a driver appreciation event coming up as an example. I get excited going to those events. I'll be at the Hutchins one in the DFW market, and having a driver come up and go, hey, here's how MVT changed my life. It's probably one of the most exciting things in my job.
Yeah. So you've talked about you want to hear the long-term plan from your drivers when you're recruiting them. But what about for you? How do you see recruiting evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
I will say this. So I think our challenge is going to be attracting a younger demographic, and we're already seeing that. Pre-COVID, the average age of a truck driver was 56. That age is now about 46.
Oh, wow.
So a wide swath of the 65-plus year age range left our industry at that point. So the challenge for us is, I will argue, if you look at Gen X, they will follow you anywhere as long as you do it digitally. There's a different mindset there, and our ability as recruiters to adapt to that, to make the job more of a technology job. As an example, as AI gets more into the truck, it becomes more of a technology job. I see a professional truck driver being a lot like a pilot is today. They become the subject matter experts on that, and I think finding that value proposition for that younger demographic that somebody over the age of 50 may not have the same appeal to that becomes really important.
Yeah, you mentioned Gen X, but I think you meant Gen Z, right?
I'm a little ahead of myself.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Gen Z.
I take Gen Z too.
Yeah, definitely into tech they are, right?
So I technically, I guess, would be a millennial, I think. So
are you in your 40s? Yeah, 30s, 40s? Yeah.
43. It's hard to keep track.
I know, especially when we keep aging, right?
Yeah, that's the weird part.
Yeah.
But the label doesn't change, so that's going to be awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what role do current drivers play in helping recruit new talent?
A major role. So as an example, in the last month, 14 of our hires came from driver referrals. It's a big piece of the equation. About, at any given time, I'd say anywhere between 5 to 20% in a given month will come from a referral. They tend to stick around longer. They already have an into the door. They know somebody, and that kind of points to that relationship part of the equation. Our challenge is often we are very origin and destination specific in our hiring, where a traditional 48-state carrier may hire from Pocatello, Idaho to Miami, Florida. We have very specific markets, so it does limit some of what can happen in that realm. But we love having them. They stay longer. They tend to know exactly where they want to go in that division. And there's an extra layer of support. So when something doesn't go perfect, which in trucking, something's not going to go perfect, having that extra outlet becomes really important.
So if you could bust a myth about driver recruiting, what would it be?
That we'll say anything to get someone into the door. I understand it from a recruiter's perspective, from a driver's perspective. The average driver that goes into the job market talks about to 8 other recruiters. And one of the things I do is I will create a fake profile and I will go on job boards. And about 2 weeks ago, I did a job board on a website and I had 24 phone calls within 24 hours.
Wow.
I get the phone from Walmart, so I have to throw it out because it's ruined at that point. The driver feels pressured that they're being obligated into something and to make a decision quickly. 10 Street, who does a lot of the applications in our industry, finds that for every 24 hours that pass, the carrier loses the opportunity to recruit that person by 50%. So there is a race in the process, and that driver feels really pressured for what should be a long-term decision. That is actually not the case. Like I said, our goal is not what next week's class looks like, but what the fleet looks like 12 months later. And most of the recruiters that would get shifty to get somebody in through the door tend to not last very long.
Yeah, so recruiting's more, it's about more than just filling a seat.
Yeah, and it's why I say there's a difference between recruiting and capacity development. Look, if 50% of your fleet's sitting on the fence, you're probably desperate to get someone through the door, and you're going to do some things that are unscrupulous. That's why you don't want to be in that position. Because if you're in a position in our world, at any given time, less than 1% of our available trucks are on the fence. That's a value to us because it allows us to have that conversation. If the trucks don't get filled next week, we're going to be okay. So the driver's not being pressured into something. It is a mutual agreement.
So what is the most rewarding moment that you've had where you knew you made a real difference in a driver's life? And I'm already thinking of the story that you told earlier.
Yeah.
But is there another story similar?
There's a lot of those. I'll be honest, and I think when I spoke with you on episode 2, we talked about Jan Dar. She was my first hire.
Yeah.
And I learn more from the drivers than I often feel like I give to them. And it's one of the rewarding things here. And it's one of those that I still talk to her. She's got like 13 grandkids at this point.
Wow.
But it's that career arc that you get to see as somebody goes through their pathway that's really exciting. I was having a conversation with one of my recruiters, and I've overseen about 500 recruiters in my career at this point. And they were asking me what I take pride in the most. And I go, well, it's those 500 recruiters and watching the career trajectory and who's gone into management and who now owns a company. That's exciting to me. The same thing applies with the drivers that we hire. Some of the drivers that we've hired over the years have started charities. Some of the drivers that we have, it's them having kids and a family. It's them starting their own trucking company in many cases. That's the most rewarding part of it, and that really happens by having that long-term trajectory as far as what we do.
So for drivers listening right now who may be on the fence about applying, what would you say to convince them?
Most everyone's going to want to talk about pay per mile. Most everyone's going to want to talk about how nice their trucks are. And we're cool having that conversation. But I think the big thing is where do you want to be 5-10 years from now? Are you looking for the job that's going to satisfy you for the next 90 days? Or do you really want to find a long-term career path with a company that has a fiduciary interest in your long-term success? I think that's what sets MVT apart from a driver's perspective. We have things that set us apart with customers and with employees in the office, but from a driver's perspective, we're probably one of the few carriers that want to have that long-term discussion.
So if you could change one thing about the industry to make a driver's career path smoother, what would it be and why?
Our industry, and this gets into the AI part of it, our industry often treats drivers as a resource, like they do the truck, like they do the trailer, and it's one of the things that hurts our industry. It's part of why our industry, on average, has about a 90% turnover right now.
Wow.
In most industries, that would be shocking, and I will tell anybody that, look, if you looked in an office setting and all your coworkers, 90% left every year, wouldn't you be in panic mode? You should be. Our industry has accepted it, and they look at them as a resource, and it's extremely frustrating. These people are no different than the person sitting across from you at a desk. They are the person that you see at the guard shack every day going into the office. They're the person that you see when you want to talk to safety. I think it becomes really important as an industry, carrier by carrier, that we view that person the same way we would any of those other positions. I think that's where we have some growth as an industry.
So, what's a part of your work that you think drivers would find most interesting or even surprising?
Yeah, it's probably looking at trends. I'm big on trends and understanding why drivers make the decisions they make. We have a lot of biases, and I call it the weatherman syndrome. The weather guy's right 90% of the time. Like, they don't mess up, but everyone remembers that day he said it's not going to rain, and then it rained, and everybody becomes a critic, and you remember that one day. The weather person's normally paid pretty well when you look at all the staff at a news station because everyone watches it. We get out of those biases, and we got to stop remembering those one-offs. And so I look at a lot of those trends. Why does this group do this? Why does this group do this? Because at the end of the day, our goal with all those trends is to give the best driver experience in the onboarding phase. And I think a lot of times when I sit down with drivers and I share some of our findings to get their feedback and their assumptions from it, they tend to be really engrossed in it, especially that data of understanding, hey, people are like me out there. That's exciting.
Yeah. So, after all of your years in recruiting, what keeps you motivated to get up every day and go to work?
I'll end it like I did with episode 2. I have the best job in the world. My week ends with telling at least one person you're hired. So my worst week, no matter how bad it gets or what goes wrong or what unexpected happens, I've told at least somebody that week you're hired. So that's exciting. I'm making somebody's life better. And it's one of the things that I always tell people in our industry, would you advise your kids to do this job? Because if the answer is no, you're probably in the wrong job. But the other part of that is I tell my kids when I describe what I do, there's a lot of ways to make a living in this world. And if you can hire people for a living, that's a pretty rewarding way to go.
It sounds great. It's a great way to end.
Enjoy every day.
All right. Robert, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having you on Truck and Talk.
Absolutely. I'm excited. I'm assuming we're going to book me for episode 17, so I'm good.
It's always great having you on. Great conversation.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
And thank you for sharing your time and your expertise as well.
Absolutely.
So, of course, to our listeners, we hope that you enjoyed today's conversation and got a closer look at the people behind the scenes who keep our wheels turning. And remember, whether you're already part of the MVT family or thinking about joining us, there is a place here for you. I'm Stephanie Valle. Until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and keep on trucking.